Evening, everyone. And this is Sunday, September 4th, and we are about to begin the evening session, the 7 p.m. session. Okay, so in the afternoon we sketched the progress of insight up to what we would call the peak, the highest stage of normal insight development, which is the stage called the knowledge of equanimity about formations, Sankar Upeka Jnana. Now beyond this lies the movement towards the world transcending attainments, towards liberation. And so this relates to a question that was brought up to me in the morning. If somebody has made, for example, a vow, a bodhisattva vow, a vow to follow the bodhisattva path over many lives, and they want to develop insight meditation, they'll be able to carry the insight as far as knowledge of equanimity about formations, but they won't, in order to preserve their vow, they won't be able to go beyond that. If they want to go beyond to the world transcending realization, then they have to give up the bodhisattva vow. If somebody has the resolution or the aspiration, not to speak of following the bodhisattva path to Buddhahood, but to continue developing the paramis or perfections over succession of lives, over many lives, maybe to become enlightened in the presence of a future Buddha, to become an eminent disciple of a future Buddha, to become a Pacceka Buddha, Pratyeka Buddha, a privately enlightened one, to become the great disciple of a Buddha. You know, you can't become the great disciple of Gautama Buddha because those positions were already completed by Sariputta and Moggallana. So in that case, one can develop insight up to equanimity about formations, but again, one won't, as long as that vow or determination is fixed in the mind, or even if it's been planted in a previous life and it's still operative, one won't be able to go beyond equanimity about formations. And so what comes after equanimity after the knowledge of equanimity about formations is the experience that is undergone by one whose determination, whose resolution is to reach realization, attainment, the world transcending attainment in that life itself. And even though there might be meditators who have that determination to reach realization in this life itself, that alone is not the guarantee that one will succeed in entering upon the next stage. In fact, there's probably the ratio of those who are practicing with that determination, who reach equanimity about formations, and then go beyond to the world transcending attainment. I don't know, I can't give an exact ratio, but it's probably like in the 1 to 1 who reaches attainment to thousands who don't. All of this depends upon the accumulation in the past and past lives of merits and paramitas and the strength of the spiritual faculties, the cultivation of the spiritual faculties like faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, the wisdom of insight, the cultivation of the foundations of mindfulness, and all the other factors of the path. So all of those have to reach the appropriate degree of maturity. But when all of these factors come together, and the meditator is practicing very earnestly within the stage of equanimity about formations, when all of these conditions come together, then the meditator is prepared to pass beyond equanimity about formations and to launch into the next stage, which is the process that's going to culminate in the Lokuttara, the world-transcending path and fruit. And this stage, it begins from equanimity about formations, but it is called, technically it's called, insight leading to emergence. Emergence means rising up from the conditioned world in order to realize the unconditioned, rising up from all defilements in order to reach the ultimate purification. Okay, so here is what the Visuddhimagga says. It says, after this meditator has reached equanimity about formations in this way, then his insight continues to mature until it reaches its culmination and leads to emergence. So the usual name for this is insight leading to emergence. And so this stage of insight, it begins with equanimity about formations, and then it passes into the next stage, which is called conformity and change. Actually, let me just skip this. This is getting a little confusing. Okay. I'm going to block this out. Just, it's enough to say that it's called insight leading to emergence. And this is insight that has reached its culmination because it has reached the culminating final stage. It is said to lead to emergence because it goes towards emergence. Emergence is the path which leads out from the conditioned world to Nibbana. Oh, it says the path is called emergence because it emerges externally from conditioned objects, from formations, and internally from defilements. And so this is the insight that culminates in the world-transcending path. And the way this works, I think it's going to come that the insight leading to emergence occurs as a single cognitive process. First, well, we have this cognitive process here in the manual. It'll be in the table 4.4, I believe it is. Yeah, I have it on page 169. But I think it's better to take it through the way it's explained in the Visuddhimagga than through that little table. Okay, so let's go to the next phase. Okay, so this is the insight that culminates in the world-transcending path. Okay, now what happens when equanimity about formations enters the stage of leading to formations? A shift takes place in the way insight is being developed. Up to this stage, one can be contemplating impermanence, dukkha, non-self, and moving between all three of them. But now what is going to happen in the process leading to emergence is that the mind is going to focus and fix on only one of those three characteristics. Different meditators will focus on one or another of the characteristics depending upon their temperament, their inclinations, their disposition. It's said, I think in some of the commentarial text, that one whose temperament is governed by faith will incline towards the characteristic of impermanence. One whose temperament is governed by, I think it's samadhi, by concentration, will incline towards the characteristic of dukkha, of suffering. And one whose temperament inclines towards wisdom will tend towards the characteristic of non-self. But that is a commentarial judgment, and maybe we don't have to take it too strictly. But in any case, in the last phase, the equanimity about formations will fix upon only one of the three characteristics, and it's that particular insight into that particular characteristic that will carry the mind to liberation. And then the insight leading to emergence gains three different names according to the particular characteristic that it focuses upon. So it's said that if equanimity about formations leads to emergence by comprehending formations as impermanent, then liberation takes place with the signless liberation. And that contemplation of impermanence in that last stage is called the signless door to liberation. So that particular last contemplation of impermanence becomes the door through which one enters into the liberation of the path. Okay, if that final equanimity about formations turns to and comprehends the characteristic of dukkha, comprehends formations as dukkha, then liberation takes place with what is called the desireless liberation. And that final observation of dukkha is called the desireless door to liberation. And if it leads to emergence by comprehending formations as non-self, then the liberation takes place as it's called the emptiness liberation, and that last contemplation of non-self is called the emptiness door to liberation. Okay, this is just says the same thing from a different angle, so we could skip over that. Okay, so now we're still in that insight leading to emergence. At the point where the emergence is about to take place. And so what happens now is that the mind undergoes a shift, or a kind of, we maybe call it an ascent, a rising up out of conditioned formations. So it starts off taking with equanimity about formations. The faith has become more resolute, the energy stronger, mindfulness better established, the mind better concentrated, and the equanimity about formations is more refined. And then at a certain point, one thinks, or one comes to know that the sense dawns on one, now the path will arise. And then equanimity about formations, after comprehending formations in one way as impermanent or as dukkha or as not self, sinks into the life continuum. This is the bhavanga. Okay, then when it emerges from the bhavanga, the bhavanga is just that flow of the subliminal consciousness that will take place just intermittently. So there's this final comprehension of impermanence, dukkha, or not self, then drop into the bhavanga, then the mind emerges from the bhavanga again, and mind or adverting arises, making formations, conditioned phenomena its object in one of these ways, as impermanent, or as dukkha, or as not self, according to the way taken by the preceding equanimity about formations. Okay, then after that mind or adverting consciousness occurs, now the javana process takes place. This is the javana process that pertains to the path, to the noble path. And so first, usually there are 7 javana citas in a series. So here, one javana citta arises, the first one arises, taking formations, some conditioned formation as its object in the same way. This is called the preliminary work, even though it's just one mind moment. Next to that comes a second javana, which again makes formations its object in the same way. This is called access. And next to that comes a third javana, which makes formations its object in the same way. This is called conformity. It's called conformity because it conforms to the functions of truth, both in the 8 preceding kinds of insight knowledge. That's from the knowledge, I think from the knowledge of arising and passing away, all the ways up through equanimity about formations. So it conforms to the functions of truth or the understanding of truth in the preceding kinds of insight knowledge and in the state of enlightenment, the enlightenment of the path that's going to follow. So all of these cittas, these states of consciousness, they're occurring in one conscious process, and these, they're all in a sense preliminary cittas. They are all taking some formation, some conditioned entity as their object and observing it as either impermanent, dukkha, or non-self. Oh, that was sort of the culmination, but we have to go on to the next chapter. Okay, then what comes next is a single citta, which is, or state of consciousness, which is called change of lineage knowledge. And this is called change of lineage because this citta is sort of half midway between being an ordinary worldling, that's an ordinary unenlightened person, and a noble person. So this is the citta through which one is making the transition. And so its position is to turn to the path, and so it belongs neither to purification by knowledge and vision of the way, that's what we've come through so far, nor to purification by knowledge and vision, but it's intermediate, and so it's unassignable. But it's still reckoned as insight because it falls in line with insight. Okay, so once one has entered into this course, this process, which we've gone through preparation, followed by, was it access? Now I have to Okay, it's preparation or preliminary access, conformity, those three are stages of insight knowledge in the full sense, and they have some conditioned phenomena as their object. A conditioned phenomena seen as impermanent or as dukkha or as non-self. Next comes the change of lineage, and the change of lineage takes as its object, it leaves behind all conditioned phenomena, and it takes as its object nibbana. It is the first citta that actually cognizes, that knows, that experiences nibbana, but it doesn't perform the functions of the path, but it's change of lineage because it's switching over from the mundane domain of consciousness to the world transcending consciousness. And then it is followed immediately by the path, by the supramundane path, which in the first instance, it's called the path of stream entry. So this marks the entry into the stream of the Dhamma. It's just one citta, one moment of consciousness, but it's up to this point, it's the most powerful moment of consciousness that this person has ever experienced. Okay, then the text here is describing how the path arises. It's sort of backtracking a little and repeating what takes place. Okay, so once one enters upon the insight leading to emergence, then nothing further needs to be done by one who wants to achieve the knowledge of the first path. Once one enters upon that insight leading to emergence, then there has arisen the preparation, the access, the conformity knowledge. So up to conformity knowledge, and at conformity knowledge, then one's mind or one's consciousness no longer enters into, settles down on, or clings to any formations at all, but retreats and recoils from all conditioned things, just as water does from a lotus leaf. Okay, then when conformity knowledge has ended, the change of lineage knowledge arises, taking nibbana as its object. And this knowledge is so called because it passes out of the plane of the ordinary person and enters upon the plane of the noble ones. One is not yet a full noble one, but one is entering upon that plane. And it is the first consciousness that occurs taking nibbana as its object. And then there's a simile that illustrates how this occurs. The simile illustrates how conformity and change of lineage occur with different objects, though they occur in the same cognitive process. It's a little, well, we'll see if we could understand the simile. Okay, suppose there's a man on one side of a river or a stream, and he wants to leap across and get to the other side of the stream. So he runs fast, and then he grabs hold of a rope fastened to the branch of a tree on the near bank of the stream, or he grabs hold of a pole, and then he leaps with his body tending towards the opposite bank, and when he arrives above the opposite bank, then he lets go and falls onto the opposite bank. And when he lands on the opposite bank, then first he staggers, but then he steadies himself and walks on. And so it's said in the same way, this meditator who wants to establish himself on Nibbana, he runs fast by means of the contemplation of rise and fall, this whole series of insight knowledges. It's like picking up speed, till he comes to conformity knowledge. So he seizes, with conformity knowledge, he seizes upon the rope of material form, or one of the poles. The poles represent a particular mental phenomena. So it's something amongst mentality or materiality that one is taking as the object. And then one leaps with the first conformity consciousness without letting go. And then with the second, one tends towards Nibbana, like the man that was tending towards the opposite bank. Then, with the third next to Nibbana, okay, he lets go of that formation as object with the seizing of that consciousness, and with the change of lineage consciousness, he falls on to Nibbana, which is the opposite bank. So the change of lineage is the first landing upon Nibbana, but just as the man who landed on the other bank was first unsteady on his feet, so change of lineage is unsteady in its focus on Nibbana. So it's like staggering, but then he steadies himself by means of path knowledge. Okay, it's said that the change of lineage, while it's able to make Nibbana its object, is unable to dispel the murk of delusion that conceals the Four Noble Truths. And so this is compared to a simile of a man who goes out at night and he wants to see the moon, but the moon is concealed by clouds. Okay, then a wind springs up, and first it blows away the thick clouds, then another wind blows away the medium clouds, and then the third wind blows away the fine clouds. And so now the man can see the moon in the sky, free from clouds, and he could see the constellations. Okay, so the thick, medium, and fine kinds of darkness that conceal the Four Noble Truths, these are like the three kinds of clouds. And the three kinds of conformity consciousness, this is actually preparation, access, and conformity. These are like the three winds which blow away the three layers of the clouds, and change of lineage knowledge is like the man now with good eyes, or I should actually say change of lineage knowledge should be like the clear sky. And Nibbana is like the moon. And so we could say that the three kinds of preliminary knowledges are removing the murk of darkness that conceals the Four Noble Truths, that conceals Nibbana. The change of lineage is the first seeing of Nibbana, when the murk that conceals the truths has disappeared, but the change of lineage is not yet able to perform the function of destroying defilements. But right after change of lineage, the path consciousness arises, the magga citta. And this citta, this consciousness, performs 4 functions. First, it sees nibbana, sees the unconditioned element, realizes the unconditioned. So it takes as its object the unconditioned element, and with seeing the unconditioned element, simultaneously, it fully understands now the noble truth of suffering. One gains the deep, comprehensive understanding of the noble truth of suffering. This consciousness cuts off certain defilements forever, permanently. The usual formula says that it eradicates 3 defilements. These are the first 3 fetters. It cuts off the view of self, which is called identity view or personality view. It cuts off doubt about the Dharma, about the Buddha as the enlightened teacher, the truth of the Dhamma. Of course, one has now seen the Dhamma for oneself. And it cuts off clinging to false practices like rites and rituals, and especially the ascetic observances, in the belief that they can bring liberation. So it cuts off certain defilements, in this case, the first 3 fetters, and then it brings into manifestation all 8 of the path factors. So all of the path factors, the 8 path factors, arise simultaneously. So the Visuddhimagga illustrates this, but I'm going to have to take a pause. Okay, you want to put that one on again? Okay. Are we ready? Okay. See, that's one of the aspects of non-self, is unsusceptible to the exercise of mastery. Okay, so the ancient teachers here are quoted by the Visuddhimagga, which explains how the path performs these 4 functions. That is, full understanding, abandoning, realizing, and developing. So it compares it to a lamp which can perform 4 functions simultaneously at a single moment. It burns the wick, dispels darkness, makes light appear, and uses up the oil. And so the path knowledge penetrates to the 4 truths simultaneously in a single moment. It penetrates to suffering by way of full understanding. It penetrates to the origination, that's the defilements that are the origin of suffering, by way of abandoning them. In this case, only certain defilements are eliminated. And it penetrates to the path by penetrating it with development, that is, bringing all the 8 factors of the path into being. And it penetrates cessation by penetrating it with realization. And that is by making cessation or nibbana its object, it reaches, sees, and pierces the 4 noble truths. Okay, so this person now, for one moment, has reached the first of the 4 noble paths, the path of stream entry. And so here we have the path moment. And this will be followed by several moments of what is called fruition, or the fruit. These are moments of consciousness, cittas, in which the meditator experiences the bliss of freedom that comes with the eradication of these defilements. I would compare the relationship of path and fruit, maybe using the simile. I use the simile of, suppose there's a prisoner who's bound by chains, and somehow he manages to find a way, maybe by rubbing the chains, rubbing them up and down against a rough surface, say over a long period of time. This is like the development of insight, the insight knowledges. So gradually it's wearing away the chains. And then at a certain point, the prisoner makes a great exertion with effort and breaks the chains. That is like the path moment, breaking the chain. And then there comes a few moments where he says, wow, I'm free of this bondage. That is like the fruit. And so the fruit, it said, usually in the case of the ordinary, let's say, relatively speaking, the ordinary practitioner, there'll be just 2 moments of fruition. Because here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then to complete the 7 jhavanas in the series, we have 2 moments of fruition. But if there is a sharp practitioner, one with keen wisdom, it's said that this practitioner doesn't need that preliminary moment of preparation. So this one, after coming to, out of mind door adverting, here mind door adverting is here. Whoops, that shouldn't have the cross out. Okay, we have the mind door adverting here. So this sharp or quick-witted practitioner goes from mind door adverting directly to access, then comes to conformity, then change of lineage, then to path, and sort of as a bonus point for being sharp-witted, he gets 3 moments of, or 3 citas of fruition. And it's said, this is what I've heard, through the grapevine, that even though the texts, the Abhidhamma text and then the commentaries, analyze the process of realization by way of these individual citas or mind moments, like most or virtually all practitioners don't experience these separate moments. Or I should say, they undergo these separate moments, but when they reflect on their experience, they don't see that they've gone through access, conformity, change of lineage, path, and fruit. They just know that this very powerful experience has occurred, and the whole objective domain has switched over from everything conditioned to something which is indescribable, just very briefly, and they feel that something entirely different has changed within their mental constitution. And then if they look back, then they can see that they've eliminated certain defilements. And so after the fruition, then there will come a drop into the bhavanga, the life continuum, and then when one emerges from the life continuum, one reflects back and one reviews. Usually one can review the path, the fruit, and nibbana, it's said. And some practitioners will also review what defilements have been eliminated, what defilements remain. Okay, so it's said at the end of the fruition, the consciousness enters the life continuum. After that, there first arises the mind or adverting, And then when that has ceased, then 7 jhavanas arise, reviewing the path. Oh, I see. So this is the way it's explaining that a series of jhavanas occur by which one reviews the path. Then another series of jhavanas occurs by which one reviews the fruition. And then another series of jhavanas by which one reviews nibbana. And then there might be some a reviewing by which one sees what defilements have been abandoned and what defilements remain. Okay, I think this is enough for tonight, and we'll take the remaining process of development tomorrow and the stages that remain. And so we have some time for questions, and I see that there have been a couple of questions submitted in writing, so let me take these first. Okay, in the tender knowledge of rise and fall, it said that a characteristic of non-self that becomes evident is that states or dhammas have no curiosity. What does this mean? Let me see if I could trace it. It's a strange expression. It's near ihaka in Pali. Let me just try to get the context. Maybe this will take me a little time, so maybe let me leave that question off for the time being, till I could get the context. Okay, the second question, non-self in terms of mentality, materiality, is understood since we can see ourselves materially changing by way of aging, and since our thoughts keep changing, we can understand the impermanent nature of mentality. But when it comes to remembering things or memory, who is it that remembers, or who has memory? What is the Buddha's views about that? Interestingly, the nature of memory is not explained or discussed theoretically at all in the Buddha's discourses. Just the question never comes up. But what I would say is that the idea that there is someone who remembers, a who that does the remembering, that is a manifestation of the view of self or of identity view. But what takes place is that there is this continuum or stream of consciousness. Events occur and they deposit or leave, call it memory impressions in the stream of consciousness. Then on a later occasion, an act of consciousness will arise which gets access to those memory impressions deposited in the stream of consciousness. So there's no persisting self that can remember and say, those were my experiences, or I did that, in the sense that there is a continuing self that underwent those experiences or performed those actions. But once one undergoes experiences or performs actions, those experiences and actions leave imprints in the mind stream, on the mind stream, which are recoverable by later occasions of consciousness. Okay, maybe we should open up to other questions. I see Stephen is first, and Tisha or Trisha second.
Thank you, Bhante. I have two questions which I think are just small points of confusion.
Yeah.
One is change of lineage, chitta.
Yeah.
Didn't we encounter that earlier preceding the jhana chitta?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, the expression change of lineage is used for both in both systems of meditation. Within the samatha system of meditation, change of lineage refers to the change of consciousness with the first attainment of jhana, or just preceding the first attainment of jhana, where the consciousness shifts over from the level of concentration, access concentration in the sense sphere. Now it's moving towards the jhana, which is fine material sphere consciousness. So that is one kind of change of lineage. But now in the system of Vipassana meditation, change of lineage, the same term is used, but it designates something else. It is the moment of consciousness which marks the shift from the level of being an ordinary person, like the technically putujana, a worldling in the technical sense, to becoming an Aryan person at the first level of the stream enterer.
Thank you. And the other quick question is, when you put up the chittas that have the two fruit chittas, is that the same as saying the attainment of path and the attainment of fruit for, say, a sotapanna will come immediately? Can't be separated out in long periods of time?
Yeah, this is the way it's explained within the Abhidhamma commentarial system, that the path citta is followed immediately by the fruition cittas. There is what I call a difference or a tension between the scheme laid out in the Abhidhamma and commentaries and what we can see in the suttas. In fact, I took a couple of suttas which show both the parallelism between sutta and Abhidhamma and also the difference, which reminds me that I don't think I could show it tonight, but I could show it maybe tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tisha, yeah.
Thank you, Bhante. I have a quick question. Supramundane, I have a question about supramundane.
Yeah.
Supramundane is a fine material realm, or if it's immaterial?
No. All those three realms of existence, the sense sphere realm, what's also called the desire realm, fine material realm, and formless realm, are considered mundane. Supramundane refers to the paths, the four paths, the paths of realization, the fruits of those paths, and nibbana.
Immaterial realm.
Excuse me?
Immaterial realm, formless realm.
No, the formless realm is still mundane. Yeah, so the desire realm, form realm, and the formless or immaterial realm are all part of the triple world. Those are the realms in which rebirth occurs. So even if one reaches the formless meditative attainments, it's still considered a mundane attainment. If one gets reborn in the formless realms or immaterial realms, it's still part of the cycle of birth and death. But supramundane refers to that which leads out from the cycle of birth and death, and then to nibbana, which is the state that transcends birth and death.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. In the comprehensive manual. Yeah, well, the chart on 186, 187, that shows the three realms of existence. But to get to supramundane, I think one would refer to the chart on the different classes of consciousness. we have one version of the chart or the table. This is table 1.9 on page 70. Actually, this table shows it very clearly, where you could see that the mundane includes 81 types of consciousness. So it includes all of the sense sphere types of consciousness, all the fine material sphere types of consciousness. Those are the types of consciousness pertaining to the jhanas. And then it includes the immaterial sphere types of consciousness. Those are the types of consciousness relating to the formless or immaterial meditative attainments. The supramundane is only the 8 types of consciousness, the 4 paths and the 4 fruits. And also it includes nibbana, which is not a state of consciousness, but that is the object of experience of the paths and the fruits. Now I don't use supramundane, but I prefer world transcending. I think it makes the meaning clearer. Okay, Ivy and Ravi.
Bande, I just want to clarify 2 things. One is you mentioned using nibbana as an object. That starts with change of lineage. Only start with change of lineage. And
as a direct object, the change of lineage, let's put it this way, the change of lineage is the first citta that experiences nibbana directly as an object.
Right.
Before that, if one is doing, if you remember from yesterday, which seems like a year ago almost. Wow, it seems like such a long time ago. But when I explained the recollection of peace, then one is doing a discursive, reflective meditation on nibbana. In that case, nibbana is not the real object, but it's just the thought about nibbana, reflecting on the qualities of nibbana, but one is not actually experiencing it.
Right. Yeah, because before that, we're basically making formations as our object.
Exactly,
And when you say formations, you're still referring to the 3 forms of liberation, like impermanence, dukkha, non-self?
Those are the 3 characteristics, not 3 forms of liberation.
So when we say making formations as our object, what are the formations are you talking about?
Formations are conditioned phenomena. So those are things included within the 5 aggregates. In other words, materiality or mental factors.
Right. So the difference between those 2 objects, I would say the using formations, it basically is rising and disappearing very quickly. Right? And using nibbana as an object, it's an unconditioned. So there's no rising and disappearing. Right? So basically because it's unconditioned element, it's a little bit difficult for me to understand, but I think the difference is just because it doesn't have rising and disappearing.
Exactly. It doesn't have, nibbana itself does not come into existence and doesn't pass out of existence.
Right.
But it's, you could say, forever existent. But the citta that realizes nibbana, of course, comes into existence as the path, and then it falls away when the path ends.
Yeah, okay. I also have a question regarding the 32 parts meditation.
Of the body,
So when we use 32 parts, it's an object to achieve concentration? So if that's the case, when we first observing the 32 parts and then to the five parts, right? And then do we need to think about, because 5 parts is still a lot to achieve concentration. Then do you pretty much just use repulsive as I don't know how that works.
The way I explained it in the afternoon was a very, very compressed way of dealing with it. To explain it in detail would take a lot of time, but let's put it briefly, that one begins with the 32 parts
Right.
in order to get familiar with them. And then one gets familiar it's useful to consult like anatomical textbooks to see pictures of the 32 parts, or, difficult to suggest the other way. But one could go to the internet and look up, is it nibbana.com, I think, to see pictures of the different parts. Okay, and then one turns them over in one's mind, going through them in groups, the way I explained, till one gets the sense of the disagreeable nature of those parts of the body. Then one starts dropping off or eliminating those parts which are not so clear and retaining only a few parts which are most clear. Then one becomes thoroughly familiar with them, and then one could drop all of the others except the one that stands out as the most distinctive.
Okay. But then during that, do we need to think about repulsive? Because some parts really make me feel it's repulsive, but some parts not so much.
Yeah. If one is doing the meditation in that way, then the aim is to sort of draw out from the parts the characteristic or that feature of being repulsive and focus on that. And so then one discards the parts which are not so repulsive until one retains only those that are
repulsive.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Stephen, and is that Ed? So Stephen here.
Bhante?
Oh, I'm sorry, I had called Ravi earlier.
Yes, Bhante, this is related to the life of the Buddha.
Yeah.
Little question that I had. Suddhodana was approached by Asita. The baby, Buddha was a little baby, Siddhartha was a little baby. And, he smiled and he cried.
Yeah.
He said, I'll be dead by the time he attains enlightenment. And also the Buddha, after attaining enlightenment, it said that he looked around and see whether anyone could understand the Dhamma.
Yeah.
Now, where would Asita be? He was not enlightened.
Yeah.
So he won't be in the supermundane realm.
Yeah.
So, but then again, he was not in a realm where he could benefit from the Dhamma.
Yeah, I think the belief is that he was to be reborn in the immaterial or formless realms. And so in that realm, he wouldn't have had eyes and ears and a physical body. And so he couldn't have seen the Buddha and heard the Buddha teach the Dhamma.
Yeah, I think you said something like this long ago, the first sessions of this. But I thought I was mistaken. So that's correct. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay. Yeah, Stephen.
Good evening, Bhante. Do path and fruition become manifest as Lokuttara jhana? And if so, how many Lokuttara jhana are there?
Yeah, this is a pretty technical question, and I dealt with that issue in the first Abhidhamma seminar. Okay, the path and fruit, this can get a little confusing for some people, so if you find it confusing, don't worry about it. But the path and fruit always occur at a level of concentration that corresponds to that of the ordinary jhanas. But they differ from the ordinary jhanas in that first the object is different. It's not a nimitta, but the object is nibbana. And then the function is different, particularly the path, that the function is to cut off defilements. But the paths and fruits will occur at the level of one or another of in the Abhidhamma system of the 5 jhanas that I explained last night. So from the one path of stream entry can occur at any of those 5 levels of absorption. So we get 5 kinds of paths of stream entry, and similarly with the 3 other paths to come. So that's 4 paths each of which can occur at the level of 5 jhanas. 4 by 5 is 23. 4 by 5 is 20, right? Okay. And then the 4 fruits also occur at the 5 levels. And so we get 20 kinds of fruition consciousness. So putting them together, 20 plus 20, 40 kinds of supramundane consciousness. But I didn't want to get entangled in those details in the exposition. Okay, one more. I said Edmund. Okay, and then Sally, then we'll have to stop. Ed. Yeah, you go.
Thank you, Bhante. I wonder if you could clarify a little issue by explaining this melange or this mix of words that we call formations,
Yeah.
mind objects, Dhamma. Sometimes we append an adjective like volitional formations,
Okay.
and sometimes we call those karma formations.
Yeah.
But we also have these objects, it seems to me, that may be something like resemble Plato's forms. You know, you have a conceptual idea of a chair to which you append a bunch of things, like its color and what is a rocking chair and all that other kinds of stuff. And these are all conditioned, we learn them as a part of our existence. Could you pull these things apart and say how they
this
work
is a
for us?
pretty big, like a doctoral dissertation, or at least a substantial paper. But let me just say, I don't really like, though in the past I used the translation formations for sankhara, but the word sankhara actually signifies 3 possible things, at least 3 possible things. In the broader sense, it means all conditioned phenomena. So all conditioned phenomena, everything in the 5 aggregates is included under the concept of sankhara. So that's when we say, like, all conditioned things are impermanent, all conditioned things are dukkha. That is sankhara in this broader sense. Then there is sankhara as the 4th aggregate. So that is the aggregate of mental, or what I call volitional activities, but it also includes all the other mental factors mentioned in the suttas, except for feeling and perception. But volition is the most prominent of those, and so we use the rendering volitional activities for sankhara as the 4th aggregate. And then there's the sankhara in dependent origination, the 2nd factor, which is volitional activities in the narrower sense, wholesome and unwholesome volitional activities. That's why it's sometimes translated as karmic formations. So it's the volitional activities which generate the karma that will bring the re-arising of consciousness and name and form. Okay, I hope that...
Thank you. Yeah, well, it clarifies it. Yes, thank you.
Okay, one more, then we'll have to stop. One last question, then we'll stop.
My question is related to someone asked a question before. So at the early stage of the Vipassana, for the purification, like the sila and so on, does this also associate with different jhanas?
The knowledge of rise and fall and so on?
The purification, the path of purification, there are different steps, right?
Yeah.
So just wondering whether those different purification associate with different level of jhanas.
No. The only one that would be actually associated with jhana is purification of mind in the practitioner who uses the vehicle of serenity. So that practitioner will aim to achieve purification of mind by attaining either access concentration or absorption concentration. And absorption is one of the jhanas, one of the levels of jhanas. But the purifications that constitute the insight knowledges are not associated with jhana, but they are associated with what I call the momentary concentration, the concentration that is a similar level, approximate level of access concentration, but it's focused on the constantly changing process of experience rather than a single stable object.
So for those person who has this kind of level, in the future, if they don't practice, they lost it, or if they reverse, they lost it, or it will carry?
Well, if somebody gives up the practice of the insight meditation, of course they'll lose those insights, or those capacity for insight will weaken. But if those tendencies had been well established, then if they take up the practice again, then those knowledges should come fairly, I don't want to say quickly, but it would not take as much effort to bring them up as it would for somebody who is starting from scratch, who has never previously developed them.
Okay, thank you.
And then if they come into a new existence, but they've been they have strong imprints of those insight knowledges, then there'll be a tendency for those insight knowledges to come up again. Like there was an American monk in Sri Lanka, like when he was living in America, this was back in the late 1970s, he just read about Buddhism and knew that he wanted to become a monk. And what I heard from another monk is that when he was on the rampway getting onto the airplane to carry him to Sri Lanka, already the knowledge of dissolution had arisen in him. Because it seems to have been like a strong impression from a previous life. Okay, I think we should stop now and then move over to the other side for our closing session of the loving kindness meditation.